I'm going to ask you one last time. Get off my yacht." The words sliced through the evening air like ice. Standing in her designer heels, arms crossed, Miranda Whitmore, the poised event hostess, delivered her demand with venomous grace. Around her, polished guests in ivory gowns and tailored suits fell quiet. All eyes shifted to the man she targeted, a calm black gentleman in his mid-30s, dressed simply in a charcoal suit, standing silently near the railing. He hadn't caused a scene. He hadn't said a word. Yet Miranda had already decided he didn't belong. "Security's coming," she added, snapping toward a waiter. Still, he didn't flinch. "Have you ever been in a room where every glance told you you're not welcome? That you were being sized up by skin tone, by shoes, by silence?" As tension crackled, the man whose name no one cared to ask finally spoke 5 words. "Call your event manager. Now." And with that, the energy on the yacht shifted. When the phone call confirmed the truth, that David Langston, the man they tried to eject, wasn't just a guest but the lead investor of the entire event, gasps echoed. Cameras dropped. Miranda's face turned pale. She hadn't just dismissed a stranger. She'd tried to erase the very man funding the party. And David? He didn't gloat. He simply stood taller, proof that dignity never needs to shout to be heard. The music was soft, the champagne cold, and the lights glittered off the water like broken slates. Stars. Everything about the yacht screamed exclusivity, except for the sharp tension slicing through the air as Miranda Whitmore, the event hostess in crimson heels and a designer gown, stepped forward and said, in a voice that cracked like ice, "I'm going to ask you one last time. Get off my yacht." Her words weren't shouted, but they didn't need to be. The judgment in her tone did all the work. All eyes turned. The servers froze. Guests holding flutes of sparkling wine exchanged discreet glances. Phones were already raised behind backs, quietly recording what they sensed would to be a moment. And at the center of it all stood a calm black man in his 30s, wearing a simple charcoal suit. No Rolex, no entourage, no expression of anger, just stillness. He hadn't spoken a word. He wasn't near the VIP section. He wasn't loud, demanding, or disruptive. He was simply there, and for Miranda, that was enough to deem him out of place. "Security is coming," she said, snapping her fingers toward a nearby crew member. "Unless you'd prefer to leave before this gets embarrassing." Still, the man didn't flinch, didn't react. Instead, he stared at her, not with defiance, but with a deep, unsettling calm. Have you ever been in a room where every pair of eyes silently said, "You don't belong"? Where every breath you take feels like a test not to confirm someone else's prejudice? A woman in red whispered, "He's not even dressed for this." A man in navy checked his watch, pretending to be above the moment but itching for it to end. The man whose name no one bothered to ask finally took a step forward, lifted his chin, and said 5 words that didn't just halt Miranda. They froze the entire yacht. "Call your event manager. Now." You could feel it. The air tightened. Guests leaned in. Forks paused over Seabase. The security guard hesitated, uncertain. Miranda, caught off guard, scoffed and waved her, clipboard like a badge. "And your name again?" she asked loudly, flipping through pages with more theatrics than effort. "David Langston," he answered clearly. Her eyes scanned but didn't read. She smiled, sweet and smug. "You're not listed. Perhaps you're with the service staff?" Someone behind him chuckled. It wasn't loud, but it cut. David didn't react. He pulled out a formal, embossed invitation. She didn't even touch it. "This must be a mistake," she said curtly. "This is a private event." When he didn't budge, she raised her voice for everyone to hear. "We can't have unverified guests. Please leave now." And still, he stood, calm, steady, dignified, because 10 years ago, David Langston had been a dishwasher at the marina. Watching these yachts set sail with people who never imagined the boy in the back kitchen would one day own the freight companies that powered their lavish imports. He remembered what it felt like to be invisible. Tonight, they were going to see him. Miranda's voice rose again, sharp and irritated. "Don't pull that card with me. You people are always pretending you belong." And just like that, everything stopped. Forks lowered, eyes widened, phones recorded. David didn't shout, didn't retaliate. He simply said, "Call your event manager. Tell them the investor just arrived." Silence. Thick. Breathless. Miranda froze. Her mouth opened, then closed. Her hands shook slightly as she pulled out her phone and dialed. "Hi. Yes, this is Cassandra from Deck 7. There's a man here claiming to be an investor. His name isn't on the printed list." Then came the response. Everyone heard it on speaker. "David Langston? Of course. He's our lead sponsor. Everything tonight was approved by his foundation." A glass dropped nearby. No one moved. Miranda's face turned white. I hadn't checked the updated list," she mumbled. "I assumed. That word hit harder than any insult. And David? He didn't say a word. He didn't need to. He reached into his inner pocket and revealed a sleek black card with gold embossing. No name, just a logo. An older guest gasped. "That's the founding investor card." Now, everyone knew. He didn't just belong. He built the platform they stood on. The woman in red who whispered earlier. She stood up and offered David her seat. "Best view on the yacht," she said sweetly. He smiled politely and walked past her. Then came the final blow. David walked to the front of the yacht. The crowd parted, not from command, but respect. He took the mic. "If the person responsible for tonight's guest list is here, I'd like them to explain why their primary investor was nearly thrown off this boat." And then, one final call. "Elena? Just wanted you to know I'm here." Her voice echoed over the speakers. "David, we're honored you came. Let us know if there are any issues." No one spoke, because the issue wasn't him. It was everything they assumed. Miranda Whitmore had hosted hundreds of exclusive events. She prided herself on knowing who belonged and who didn't. So when she spotted him stepping onto the deck of her private yacht soir, quiet, composed, black, wearing an understated charcoal suit, she felt something tighten inside her. It wasn't what he did. It was how he moved, with calm, with certainty, like he had every right to be there. And that threatened her before he ever said a word. The yacht was alive with murmured laughter, clinking glasses, and string music playing under the stars. But when Miranda crossed the deck in her 6-inch heels and blocked the man's path, with a clipboard in one hand and venom wrapped in velvet, everything changed. "I'm going to ask you one last time," she said, loud enough for others to hear. "Get off my yacht." People paused. Conversations dipped into silence. Someone tilted a phone, already recording. He didn't raise his voice, didn't challenge her. He stood near the railing, drink untouched, eyes steady. One could mistake him for a wallflower, if not for the power in his posture. She stepped closer, perfume clashing with sea breeze. "I don't care what your invitation says," she hissed. "You don't belong here." And in that moment, everyone around them decided who he was before he ever said a word. The man in the navy suit smirked. A woman in red whispered, "He doesn't look the part." No one asked his name. No one asked who invited him. They didn't need to, because some people are guilty of existing in the wrong space. She snapped her fingers toward a staff member. "Security is coming. Unless you'd like to, leave quietly." Her voice dripped with fake politeness. Still, he didn't move. Instead, he finally spoke. "Call your event manager. Tell them the investor just arrived." 5 words. That was all it took. It wasn't bravado. It was truth wrapped in composure. The crowd didn't gasp. They froze. Miranda blinked. "Excuse me?" He reached into his pocket and pulled out a formal, embossed invitation. She didn't touch it, just scanned it with a fake smile. That must be a mistake, she said smoothly. Maybe you were meant to be on the service crew. A chuckle behind him. Quiet. Cruel. The kind of laugh that tells you you're being erased in real time. He didn't react. Not yet. She turned slightly, angling her body to half-block the entrance. You need to step off the boat, Seer. We can't verify your credentials. Still composed, still dignified. He answered calmly. Call. Your manager. Cassandra's eyes narrowed, but she dialed. Hi, this is Cassandra from the deck event. There's a gentleman here. Claims to be an investor, but I don't see his name listed. She waited, and then the voice crackled over the speaker. David Langston? Yes, of course. He's our founding investor. Everything you're standing on tonight was made possible by him. A glass shattered somewhere behind them. Miranda's smile cracked like old porcelain. No, I hadn't checked the updated list, she mumbled. I assumed. That word. Assumed. A single assumption had just turned a powerful man into a threat in her eyes, and now the entire crowd saw it. She looked at David again, more carefully this time. But it was too late. The damage was done. He didn't raise his voice, didn't explain. He didn't have to. Instead, he pulled something else from his inner coat pocket. A small, dark leather card holder. From it, he slid out a sleek black card. No name, just a gold-embossed logo. Elegant, unmistakable. An older gentleman near the piano audibly gasped. That's the founding investor card. He whispered. You can't even get one of those unless you built the company, unless you funded the vision, unless you were the very foundation the party was built on. David had been there before 10 years ago, working on the docks nearby, washing plates, watching the same kinds of people cruise by without seeing him. Back then, they laughed. Now, they listened. Now, they watched. Miranda tried to recover. Mr. Langston, please forgive the confusion. But David didn't respond. Instead, he walked toward the front of the yacht. The crowd parted, not from fear, but respect. He took the mic from the junior coordinator and said calmly, if the person responsible for tonight's guest list is present, I'd like them to explain why the primary investor was nearly thrown off the yacht. Silence. Then came the final blow. He tapped his phone. One contact. On speaker. Elena Caraway, Director of HarborLex Global Events. How can I help? Hi, Elena. It's David Langston. Just wanted to say, I'm here. The voice on the other end lit up. David, we're honored. The whole evening is under your name. Let us know if anyone gives you trouble. He smiled. No trouble now. Thank you. And just like that, it was done. Cassandra stood still. Clipboard useless. Smile gone. Reputation dissolved in front of an audience. David, he didn't gloat. He didn't need to, because the room had already rewritten the narrative. And the man they tried to erase? He now owned the story. She wore confidence like a gown flawless, rehearsed and sharp as her stiletto heels. Miranda Langley, the evening's hostess, stood at the edge of the yacht's upper deck, with a glass of champagne in one hand and judgment in the other. Every detail of the charity gala had been orchestrated to perfection. The lighting, the wine, the guest list. But now, all that careful control unraveled the moment he stepped aboard. A black man, mid-30s, in a quiet gray suit. No designer flash, no entourage, just quiet, confidence and calm eyes. The kind of presence that doesn't ask for permission, but doesn't beg for attention either. Still, to Miranda, that was enough to raise a red flag. She cut through the music like a blade wrapped in silk. I'm going to ask you one last time, she said, voice cool, amplified by silence. Get off my yacht. The surrounding guests didn't look directly, but they all listened. Phones hovered low. Conversation posed. Eyes darted, evaluating the tension, measuring status. He stood still, one hand on the railing. Nothing threatening. Nothing loud. Just there. And for Miranda, that was the problem. I don't care what your invitation says, she added. You don't belong here. The man didn't respond, not with words. Just a glance, calm, disarming. Miranda took a breath, then snapped toward the nearest staff member. Security, please. The man blinked, slowly. Not in fear. In memory, because he'd seen this before. The same. Script. Different setting. The crowd didn't know who he was. And they didn't care to ask. They saw only what they'd been trained to see. A man who didn't look like a guest. And because he didn't fit the mold, they quietly agreed. He must be in the wrong place. A woman whispered. He's probably lost. Another said. He doesn't seem dressed for this. But then, for the first time, the man spoke. Call your event director, he said evenly. Tell her the investor just arrived. And like that, the air cracked. Miranda's brow lifted. Investor? She stepped closer, smile frozen into something brittle. With dramatic flair, she flipped through the pages of her guest list clipboard. And your name is? David Carter, he replied, calm as ever. Miranda scanned quickly, too quickly to actually read. Strange, she said loudly enough for those nearby to hear. You're not listed. Maybe you were meant to help with catering? A snicker behind him. The cruel kind. David said nothing. He reached into his jacket and presented a formal embossed invitation. She didn't take it. She didn't even look at it. Instead, she stepped slightly to the side, half blocking the entryway. I'm going to need you to leave, sir. This is a security matter. Miranda was no longer speaking to him. She was performing for the audience. But David had seen enough. He looked at the waiter who had been summoned as security and asked plainly, Do you know who I am? The waiter hesitated, uncertain, then stepped back. That single step, barely noticeable, was all it took to break the fad. Miranda faltered. Don't pull that card with me, she snapped. You people are always pretending you belong. The gasp didn't come from one person. It came from the room. The statement hung in the air, like poison. Still, David didn't raise his voice. He reached slowly into his inner pocket and pulled out a slim leather card holder. From it, he removed a sleek black card with a gold-embossed logo, simple, powerful, unmistakable. One guest near the bar audibly gasped. Another murmured, That's the founding investor card. Now the silence was different, weighted, watching. Miranda froze. Then her phone rang. It was the call she never wanted. David didn't need to speak. She answered, nervous. Hello? Yes, this is Miranda from the deck event. There's a man here claiming to be Pause. A voice crackled through. Everyone around her heard it. David Carter is our lead sponsor. The entire event exists because of him. Treat him accordingly. She swallowed. David didn't gloat. He didn't smirk. He just turned away. The same people who had whispered earlier now leaned in. A woman who once dismissed him offered her chair. A man who had laughed earlier now reached for a handshake. David didn't accept either gesture. He walked forward, through the crowd that had just minutes ago agreed to erase him. Not with words, but with silence, with assumptions. And now they knew the truth. He wasn't on the list. He wrote the check that made the list possible. The sunset wrapped the yacht in a golden haze as laughter danced through crystal glasses and designer gowns brushed polished teak floors. Everything looked perfect. Until Miranda. Ellison spotted him. He wasn't loud. He wasn't pushing his way through the crowd. He simply stood near the railing, sipping a soda in a dark, unbranded suit. Calm, composed, alone. And yet, Miranda's expression shifted the moment their eyes met. He wasn't part of the image she had crafted for tonight's exclusive fundraiser. He didn't look like the others. No designer watch. No sleek European accent. No familiar surname. And in her world, that was enough. She approached with a practiced smile and a clipboard held like a sword. "I'm going to ask you one last time," she said, voice polite but loaded. "Get off my yacht." Guests turned slowly. Some pretended not to notice, but they all listened. The man blinked, calmly. "Is there a problem?" Miranda folded her arms. "I don't care what your invitation says. You don't belong here." There was no raised voice, no chaos. Just a calculated dismissal delivered with crisp articulation. Someone behind her smirked. A few phones tilted, just slightly. The scene was being recorded quietly, carefully. "Security is coming," Miranda added, her tone louder now. "Unless you'd like to leave on your own." But he didn't leave. He stood there, absorbing the hostility like he'd seen it 1,000 times before. Because he had. Miranda couldn't read him. That made her nervous. Have you ever stood in a place where every glance was a silent judgment, where the air wasn't hostile, but heavy with doubt? He had. She stepped closer. "What was your name again?" "David Marshall," he answered plainly. She flipped through the guest list with the grace of theater, not intention. "You're not here," she said sharply. "Maybe you were supposed to help with catering?" A soft laugh behind him, someone amused. Another form of dismissal. But David didn't move. Didn't flinch. Didn't fight back. And then, without raising his voice, he said 5 words. "Call your event manager. Now." The words hit like a lightning bolt. The tension shifted. Eyes widened. Guests stopped sipping. A waiter hesitated mid-step. Miranda's mouth twitched. She looked around, then slowly took out her phone and dialed. "This is Miranda from the upper deck," she said. "There's a man here claiming to be an investor. His name isn't on my guest list, but..." And then came the voice on speaker. Clear, unmistakable. "David Marshall? Yes, he's our lead investor. The entire Harborfront initiative was his idea. Is there a problem?" The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was revelatory. A glass clinked against the deck and rolled away. Nobody moved to pick it up. Miranda's face drained of color. "I didn't check the updated list," she stammered. "I assumed." That word. Assumed. It hovered like a cloud over the deck. David didn't say anything. He simply reached into his coat and pulled out a slim leather case. From it, he produced a matte black card with a golden insignia. Small, elegant, and devastatingly powerful. The card needed no name. One man near the piano gasped. "That's the Apex Capital Founders card," he whispered. "There are only 6 in circulation." The room wasn't just watching anymore. It was recalculating. Guests who'd looked through him now looked toward him. A woman who had avoided his gaze earlier stood and offered him her seat. Another handed him a glass of champagne. David nodded politely, but didn't sit, didn't drink. He didn't need to. He walked slowly toward the center of the yacht. The music had stopped long ago. The wind had even quieted, as if nature knew something important was happening. Taking the microphone from a stunned assistant, David turned to the crowd and said, "If the person responsible for tonight's guest list is here, I'd like to ask why your primary investor was nearly escorted off the yacht in front of your guests." No one replied. They couldn't. He tapped his phone. On speaker. "Elena Jacobs, head of development." "Who is this?" "Elena, it's David Marshall. Just letting you know I've arrived." "David, we're thrilled you're here. Let me know if there are any issues. This night is yours." The moment was irreversible. No amount of apology could undo what had been revealed. David turned to Miranda, not with gloating, but quiet finality. "Not everyone gets a second chance to make a first impression." She nodded weakly. Her clipboard now looked like a prop from a failed performance. People weren't watching David anymore. They were watching her. That night, David didn't just reclaim space. He redefined it. He didn't raise his voice. He raised the standard. And in doing so, he reminded everyone of a truth they'd conveniently forgotten. Power doesn't always enter loudly. Sometimes it arrives quietly and waits for you to Reveal yourself first. The clinking of champagne glasses, soft jazz, and the hum of idle gossip painted a perfect evening aboard the lavish yacht. Spotlights shimmered across the ocean's surface, casting golden ripples that danced under designer heels and tailored tuxedos. This was a world of quiet power and unspoken hierarchies. A world where appearance spoke louder than introductions, and that's why they noticed him the moment he stepped aboard. He wasn't flashy. No silk pocket square, no entourage, no Rolex glinting in the light. He wore a simple charcoal gray suite. Crisp, clean, purposeful, but different. He was different. Miranda Graves, the event hostess and self-proclaimed gatekeeper of elegance, clocked him instantly. Her eyes narrowed, scanning him from shoes to skin tone. And then came the smile, not one of welcome, but one used to send people away without lifting a finger. She stepped in front of him, perfectly poised and coldly pleasant. "I'm going to ask you one last time," she said, her voice low but slicing. "Get off my yacht." Conversations faltered. A few guests tilted their heads, pretending not to listen. But phones were already raised at discreet angles. Something was happening, and they wanted to catch it. First, the man mid-30s, composed. Black stood still, one hand lightly resting on the railing. Not defensive, not embarrassed, just waiting. "I don't care what your invitation says," Miranda continued, stepping closer. "You don't belong here." She didn't shout. She didn't need to. Her tone did the job. Smooth, condescending, absolute. Still, he said nothing. "Have you ever been in a room where every glance is a verdict? Where your very presence becomes a problem?" He had. Miranda flicked her wrist toward a server. "Security is on the way," she added. "Unless you'd prefer to leave on your own." The crowd tightened like a noose. People sipped slower. Whispers buzzed. A woman in a lace sequined gown whispered to her partner, "He's not even dressed for this." But then, just before the weight of judgment could crush him, the man took a slow step forward and said 5 simple words. "Call your event manager." Now, it wasn't a threat. It wasn't a plea. It was a sentence sharpened by experience. Miranda blinked. "Excuse me? Call your event manager," he repeated, eyes steady. "Tell them the investor just arrived." And like that, everything shifted. Miranda's smirk faltered. "Investor?" She pulled her clipboard closer and flipped through the guest list in exaggerated, performative speed. "Name? Michael Reed." She scanned quickly. Too quickly to actually check. "I don't see your name," she said. "Maybe you were meant to be on the service crew?" The comment hit like a slap, quiet, humiliating. Someone snorted behind him. Another took a photo. Still, Michael didn't flinch. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a sleek, embossed invitation. She didn't touch it, just gave it a glance and muttered, "Must be a printing error." Then, stepping to block the walkway, she said, "I'm going to need you to step off the yacht, sire." But he didn't step back. He folded his hands behind him, not in defiance, but in control. And then came her fatal mistake. She raised her voice, just a notch. "You people are always trying to sneak in, always pretending you belong." The words sliced through the night. Someone near the bar froze mid-sip. Another lowered her phone. No one said a word. They didn't have to. The damage was done. Michael didn't raise his voice. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, dark, leather card holder. Inside was a sleek black card with gold embossing. No name, just a logo. An older man near the piano gasped. "That's the Apex Founders card," he whispered. "He's that Michael Reed?" Now the silence was different. Tense, embarrassed, reverent. Miranda's lips parted, then closed. Her voice turned thin. I wasn't aware you were affiliated at that level." He tilted his head slightly. "You weren't expected to know," he said calmly. "That's the problem. He turned and walked toward the center of the deck. People moved out of his way like the sea. Parting. He took the microphone from a stunned coordinator, held it gently, and addressed the room. If the person responsible for the guest list is here, I'd like them to explain why the lead investor was almost escorted off this yacht. A few guests gasped. One whispered, "Oh no." Another turned away, trying to distance herself from earlier laughter. Then, in full view of everyone, Michael tapped his phone, turned on speaker, and said, "Elena? It's Michael. Just wanted you to know I'm here." The voice on the other end chirped to life. "Michael Reed, we're thrilled you came. Let us know if there are any issues." Miranda's shoulders dropped. Her clipboard now looked like a prop in a bad play. No one looked at her. They were all watching him. Michael didn't look back, didn't seek revenge. He didn't need to. Because power, when it's real, doesn't need volume. It needs presence. And that night, the man they tried to silence became the only voice that mattered. He didn't shout. He stood. And in doing so, he reminded them, all dignity doesn't ask permission. It commands attention. She stood tall in heels and a fitted red gown, her clipboard gleaming under the yacht's soft lights. Miranda Taylor had always believed she could spot power the moment it walked in. So, when she saw a calm black man in a simple suit by the deck railing, she didn't see influence. She saw inconvenience. "You don't belong here," she said flatly, waving security forward. Guests turned away, awkwardly. A few smirked. He hadn't done anything wrong except exist in a space she had already decided he didn't fit. But he didn't argue. He simply said 5 quiet words. "Call your event director." Now, when the call went through on speakerphone, the crowd heard it clearly. He was the lead investor. The event existed because of him. Gasps followed. Miranda's confidence crumbled. And the man who was nearly erased? He didn't gloat. He just stood tall, dignity intact. Sometimes the world will try to define your worth based on your appearance or your silence. But true power doesn't shout. It simply shows up and lets the truth speak. Don't shrink to fit spaces built to exclude you. Stand your ground. Your presence matters, even when they pretend it doesn't. If this story moved you, drop a comment below. I know my worth. Share your thoughts. Have you ever been underestimated? And don't forget to subscribe for more real, powerful stories that remind you you belong. Always.